Good evening, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us on another DevOps Live virtual meetup. So before we get started and I bring on our speaker, I want to let everyone know that, if you haven't heard, from previous meetups, that the DevOps Days Dallas, the DevOps Days DFW conference that was supposed to happen this August has been postponed to August 2021. And the actual person that we're going to have tonight, let me go ahead and bring him on. His name is, let's see here. There we go. His name is Marco Coulter, and he is with AppDynamics, and they are a great supporter of the DevOps Days DFW meetup, and also of the DevOps Days DFW, the actual conference. So definitely a great supporter of the community. And thank you once again, Marco, for joining us tonight. And I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself. Tonight, Marco is going to be talking to us about AIOps and how it will change the DevOps. And kind of interested to hearing more about that because it sounds like an interesting topic.
Okay, listen, thanks very much, Mike. Yes, AppDynamics is proud to sort of support the DevOps community across the board. I'm actually an ambassador for the DevOps Institute as well.
Awesome.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and break in the middle. I'm going to ask everybody, as you get a question, just put it straight in because Mike's going to capture them. Right. If we can, I'll have a break in the middle of the session. We'll take some of the questions then, and then we'll finish the session and or else we'll just take all the questions at the end. We'll see how we're going. Right. But with that, if we're ready to go, you want to share the screen? And we'll just make sure that's working. Are you seeing a shared screen there, Mike?
Not yet. No.
Okay, let me try this again. Of course, the technology goes wrong at the last moment. Let me try that.
There we go. Let me add it in. There we go.
There we go. Okay, fantastic. So yeah, so today tonight I'm going to be talking about, thank you for an hour of your life. I'm going to be talking about AIOps and how it is the survival mechanism for DevOps. I'll start with DevOps began as a way to deliver availability and survive agile methodologies, right? And along the way to CI/CD, it became an overwhelming sort of set of tools cobbled together to deploy code. Simultaneously, applications moved around from sort of front end to back end and cloud and microservices. And the monitor stage of DevOps now basically exceeds the human capability for comprehension. We're missing things, and that's not good. We need to augment ourselves with machine learning and automation. So during the session, I want you to think a little bit about your last war room incident and consider whether you are reactive or proactive. By augmenting ourselves through AIOps, we're trying to move towards this nirvana of being preemptive. Maybe I should introduce myself a little bit. So g'day, I'm Marco. I'm an immigrant who's lived in 3 countries, and I've managed teams based in 13 countries. I've worked for one of the top 50 international banks. I've managed data centers for hospitals and financial institutions. And before joining AppDynamics, I spent about 5 years as an industry analyst running the data science team at 451 Research. I've seen technology from every side, as a vendor, as an operator, a developer, as an analyst, and as a buyer. And that gives me a unique view. So on the left here, you'll see some of the places you can read my writing or interviews with me. So enough about me. Take a moment to think where you are in your DevOps environment today. You'll see four quotes here on the screen, whether you're in reactive, proactive, predictive, or preemptive. In DevOps, we're always on a journey, right? From basic system management scripts up to application performance monitoring. And then we added in business transaction monitoring. And as we moved from systems to virtual machines to containers, we also moved from fixed configuration files to business policy-based dynamic software-defined infrastructure. We need help to visualize and gain insight into our environment. So as an agent of transformation for your organization, you're going to want to move artificial intelligence and machine learning into DevOps, and not because it's fun, which it is, but because it's necessary for you to survive. So have you got your answer in your mind? Now compare yourself against almost 2,000 respondents that our parent Cisco's result from the study in December 2019. The industry understands that we need to move towards preemptive, and it's not waiting around. The plurality will get there in about 2 years' time. So what is the appeal of AIOps? Well, let's look into that. This session, as I say, is targeted at agent transformation, the aspirational people among you who want to make DevOps a better place. I'm going to go through some of the pain of DevOps, take a reality check on machine learning, and then move forward to defining AIOps. And at the end, I'll give some experience-based hints on how to choose and how to think about adopting AIOps. So let's get going. You're not alone, right? DevOps can be hard. Now, this is a great visualization of the DevOps stages and the recursive nature of DevOps. Yet by making each segment equal in size, it overlooks the time dimension. The code we write can live in production for a long time. I once took about 5 weeks to write some assembler code for interest calculations for a major bank in Australia. Now, through friends who stayed at the company, I learned that they were still running that same code over 9 years later. So the operate and the monitor stages can last a long time. And all of these stages, well, they grew more complex over time. The way that we architect applications and digital services has changed dramatically. Infrastructure went from physical to virtual machines. In return for making it easier, we got VM sprawl. Today, it's about multi-cloud approaches and platform as a service, and we changed from VM to containers and Kubernetes, and in return, we got cloud sprawl. And the rise of serverless technologies or functions as a service, well, that's going to get us, that's going to get us microservice sprawl. And all of this while dealing with this increasing number of languages and frameworks. So you didn't imagine it. Your world is more complicated. So how can we manage all this? We started with siloed tools, debuggers and network monitors and DBA tools and so on, all sort of separate things. So while historically those separate control planes remain important, they become too complex. That siloed operational model is starting to collapse under its own weight in this new world. We need a better way, which takes us back to the importance of artificial intelligence to make sense of all this data. But first, let's understand what AI ML is good at. For that, I'm going to talk for a few minutes about AI and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning. So, okay, we've all seen the movies, whether it was Terminator or Ex Machina, the robot that is so like a human we can't tell the difference. And in the trade, we call that artificial general intelligence. And it doesn't exist today. I doubt we will ever truly reach that. Now, on the reality though today is that you see here, what you're seeing here is a Boston Dynamics robot. It was trained to grab and turn a handle and push open a door. It wasn't trained what to do when the door was already open. So there's 2 points here. One, it's always funny watching a robot fall over. And while machine learning is great at maths, it only learns what you teach it. So if AI/ML is not going to give us our robot boyfriend or girlfriend anytime soon, what is it good for? Well, to answer that, we need to look at an example of machine learning. I'm going to use a very simple example here of training a model to predict the selling price Y of a home using simple linear regression algorithm, Y = A + BX. If you've already trained models with TensorFlow or something like that, you can tune out for a few slides. If you haven't, I thoroughly recommend trying it out for yourselves some weekend. So anyway, that's our algorithm. Here's our source data set. And some of the terms I'll use. The columns or features, each row, is an instance. And what we're trying to get to is the objective. Now I'm using screenshots here to avoid overloading my machine with all of the virtual software. It's the curse of the virtual session. So stepping through it, I'm using a Jupyter notebook, so we're in Python, and we're using Pandas as the analysis library. Now, Pandas is easy to use. It avoids us having to switch across to R for analysis and modeling. And it's certainly good enough for linear regression. If you've got more complex needs, you might want to start looking at scikit-learn or stats model. I'm also going to pull in NumPy to give us some large array and a few other math functions here. At the bottom, we read our source data set into what Pandas calls a data frame. It's just like a spreadsheet. Cleaning data is normally a job for a data engineer, separate role to sort of the data scientist, but this is simple. So we prepare the data by just losing the features or columns that are not important to us, and that's why we're dropping these unwanted features. Cleaning out irrelevant features like this, well, that just helps make the model training process run faster, because training can consume an awful lot of time. So now we execute our sort of first correlation run to identify the feature that's going to work best for our X value. So this identifies the feature that seems to have the best relationship to our target feature of last sold price. Now, of course, when you're looking down the fields on the left-hand side here, you see that last sold price gets a value of 1 because it is the target value that we're seeking out. But what we're trying to do here is identify the other values that come closest to 1 in that correlation. Now, there were thousands of rows in this data set. You could do it as a human being, but it would take you longer than the few seconds it took to run this. So let's just pick the top correlated feature, and that's our X in our regression. So now we need to calculate meaningful values for our constants A and B. By training our model, we will calculate the best value for these constants. We split the source data set into 2. You see a 0.3 in green at the top of the screen here. Well, that means we're holding back 30% of our data for testing. So one set of data to train the model, a portion of the data to test that the model trained successfully. Training the model produces the coefficient and intercept for our line. So I'm just going to visualize the results for you. So we pull in matplotlib into the graph, and now we have a pretty blue line as the linear regression. Now, of course, that's a super simple example, but what does training a model do? Well, it takes an existing program, feeds it data to create a more complex program. So we ran a program, the Pandas library, with the input of our data to create a more complex program, the trained model. The trained model, just a more complex program, will take the input now of square footage and produce the output of a prediction of the selling price. Now, super simple example. I apologize to the people who do this for a living. I know I've oversimplified all this, but I just wanted to get, if you get into natural language programming or image recognition, the trained model will end up being this nested neural network of complexity beyond the capability of humans. But here comes the key message from all of this. Machine learning finds patterns and derives conclusions at speeds that humans are not capable of. It is not magically human. It is just maths. And it works best with lots of specific metrics, like those produced by infrastructure and operating systems and cloud managers and application performance monitoring. And that's why AI/ML and ITOps or DevOps or SRE are such a great match. So what is AIOps? I could say that, it's applying AI/ML to DevOps, but that doesn't really tell you much. So let's try a few different definitions here. So one is to say AIOps is the next-gen IT monitoring solution. It brings automation, performance, service management under one holistic approach. What it is a specialized AI for DevOps to enable autonomous systems to separate the signal from the noise. These systems will self-manage and auto-configure and auto-heal. And I'll talk about that in the next few slides. Look, if we can have self-driving cars, then we can have self-managing applications, right? So as AIOps hits the mainstream, the highest priority use cases you see on the right here are going to be intelligent alerts, their event correlation, threat detection on the security side, optimization, and auto remediation. Now, here's a sort of text definition, if you like. You can read this definition yourself, but the key point is really what AIOps will do is take things off the plate of the engineer. So to best understand that, let's look through some examples of what engineers have to do around anomalies and performance management and so on today. I don't know, so just, have you ever manually set health rules or thresholds for a performance monitor? I have, and this is a living hell. The key question is, what do you set the thresholds to, particularly if it's a brand new application? What is normal? All right. Now, knowing normal allows you to detect anomalies. So there are two ways to identify normal. One is historical, that 9 a.m. login storm is normal. The same thing happening at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, that's an anomaly. So historical is one. The second is contextual. These metrics generally track together, or maybe they track in opposition to each other. The threshold here is set to watch for the context changes. If you think about context, imagine trying to manually set a threshold for context. When metric 1 is high and metric 2 spikes, then metric 3 should spike at the same time, or else it's an anomaly. Okay, that's one, but now imagine tracking and defining that across all the frameworks, infrastructure, and applications in your organization. Not humanly possible. And that's why machine learning is so cool in DevOps. This drudgery is done for you. The APM can identify and define normal state out of the box. So let's drill into correlation a little bit and see how it works for detection. Calculating normal is not just time of day, as I say, but also watching the metrics around the metric, the contextual metrics. So, take network bandwidth and transactions per second. When these metrics track together, even if they change from historical norms, but they are tracking together, then life is good and normal. There's no need for the red lights to go off. But what if that changes? What if one goes up and the other isn't? Well, now we see the contextual misalignment, and you have an anomaly. In this example, if your transactions per second are going up, but your network bandwidth is flat, you're constrained. You're going to be delivering terrible response times. Also, it would be a mistake to only think about system metrics here. We need to be able to detect configuration anomalies too. I don't know about you, how many of you have dealt with the painful experience of troubleshooting like multiple simultaneous failures in a Kubernetes cluster comprised of hundreds or thousands of nodes. A visual dashboard, well, that cannot differentiate between the issues. That's just going to say these nodes are having problems. However, machine learning can apply clustering or grouping and identify the existence of multiple simultaneous problems, and thus helping you triage to analyze them separately and reducing the overall mean time to recovery. So now we come to the heart of the matter, which is this automated root cause analysis. Now, in the SRE world, there is a whole debate about whether root cause analysis is a thing. It's really root causes analysis and things like that. I accept it. I understand what they're trying to say. I don't care. I'm just going to call it root cause analysis, okay? So just bear with me for this session. Detecting anomalies that matter in real time and scale is what root cause analysis is about. It's about augmenting you, doing the math faster than you ever could. By the way, the AppDynamics cognition engine, sorry, just going back for a second, the AppDynamics cognition engine, it requires zero manual configuration and it baselines all of these metrics for you. So, and of course, you can override the baselines if you need to. There are three key aspects to automated root cause analysis. So let me just quickly step through them. First comes the alert, automatically detecting the anomalies in business transaction performance. Next, we're going to avoid alert fatigue by we're going to automatically correlate all of those anomalies and events and go, hey, you see all these different events and alerts that happened. They're really one anomaly. And that's also helping us timeline it and identify the most suspicious causes. And then finally, the AI also automatically identifies and isolates resource problems. But there's another dimension to this, which is the business impact. Consider the scenario where everything in your application, the servers, the application code, the databases, they're all under load, but just below the normal thresholds. The system's going to look green like this flow map. But consider the customer experience. The cart transaction travels across each of these components. And instead of the usual median response for each step, it's getting the maximum response time just within the range. All of those extra milliseconds add up. And the business transaction that the customer experiences is actually so slow that they're abandoning carts. So a system metric alone will not detect this. You also need to measure and track the overall business impact and business transaction. Seeing it from the business point of view will detect those obscure anomalies that can poison applications. So now that we've addressed alert fatigue, we've got rid of the war rooms and the blame rooms through automated root cause analysis. But what about the actual automation? Well, you're going to want to trigger the correct rectifications. And that is likely going to use a separate product. No product does everything for you, right? So you're going to need integration as part of your AIOps platform. And that leads me to our strategy of a central nervous system. So you should always be asking about how, an AIOps solution is integrating to other AIOps solutions. AIOps has to ingest from all of the individual domains on the left here, right? Could be different vendor products, could be our own agents or something like that. And it could be open telemetry. Open telemetry is just another input for AIOps. It's funny in the industry, observability is starting to build up some buzz at the moment. And the open telemetry side, I understand the strong interest in that open source solution. But for observability itself, it's really just modern monitoring. It's not a different thing, but it's a new word and we might all start using it soon. But anyway, all of this data needs to be combined so that it can be correlated. Remember the machine learning example, the robot example? If you don't teach it, if an algorithm doesn't see data, it can't learn anything. It won't tell you that it didn't see that data. So you need all of these domains to come into one place here, open telemetry, everything else, so that it can be correlated. And then the automation is driven outwards through APIs and script commands and so on. And whether it's a basic ticket creation or with Harness, doing full version rollbacks as we do, or resource optimization, shrinking and growing clusters and reassigning network bandwidth through Turbonomic or Cisco's Intersight, you're going to want, as this happens, that central nervous system, that control to be within your central nervous system. You want the control to be in that circle in the middle. Then the executions should be local. They can live out within the integrated family close to where the action will actually take place. But we need to understand something, and that is that when you automate, you're incurring technical debt. Now, Mike, if you want to, I can pause right now, and if we have any questions backed up, I'll take some questions on the content so far, and then I can move on and tackle the next sort of, the next section is about, how to deploy and how to get AIOps to work.
Yeah, I don't see any questions have popped in. I don't know. I'm going to give everybody a few seconds to, you want to post your questions in there, feel free to do so. But I don't see anything in there. So why don't we just go ahead and go on and continue.
Absolutely.
As they come in, I'll let you know.
That's fine. I'll call for them again. I have a question slide at the end.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So, okay, let's talk about some of the things that you need to think about if you're going to put AIOps in place. And I'm not talking about installing the AppDynamics product here. I'm talking about the thought processes, the strategy behind AIOps. So when you automate, as I mentioned before, you're incurring technical debt, right? Because if you create an automation for something and then, I don't know, you change the version of the software on that thing, you update your networks, you get a new application in, you're going to have to go back and potentially update some scripts or some commands or some API calls. So you don't want to just sort of automate everything. It helps to identify what to automate and where to begin. So through my work as a consultant with people doing this, I've come up with some criteria that give you an easy approach and just helps you get in the mindset of where automation adds value and where it subtracts value. Listen, automation's not new. Sysadmins, release engineers, we've been automating builds and testing for over a decade. But some remediation tasks, like a rebuild of a database or recovery of a shard or something, they might not be suitable for automation. So here are the 5 criteria I use when I'm consulting with people. We start off with the first one, which is frequency. Does it happen often enough to warrant automation? This is where you want a query language for your APM or AIOps platform. Once you know what the anomaly, because the anomaly just happened now, and okay, it might have finally broken, but you want to know it might have come close to breaking 15 times over the last year. So even though it's only broken once, the 15 times in the past year that it came close, you just were lucky, right? But it might qualify then based on frequency. So you want to think about frequency, but also you want a query language in your AIOps platform so you can sort of search back through time to go, did we come close to this happening in the past? The second one here is impact. Are you automating the solution to a major issue? Is the impact of this an outage, a customer loss, or is it just annoying to you? So really we need to be thinking about what's the cost to the business. Here is where tracking business transactions will enable you to correlate impact to the organizational value. Third, we have coverage. What proportion of the real world process can you automate? If the task requires a manual step like unplugging a cable or contacting your cloud provider, then automating the other parts may not be that helpful. So you want to think about, what automation can cover of the entire remediation process. Probability is about successful automation. What is the accuracy of the procedure? Does it resolve correctly each time? And then time scale. How quickly will all the steps execute when they're automatically initiated? As I said earlier, you're not going to want to, or you may not want to automatically begin a multi-hour database rebuild or a multi-hour backup recovery. Momentary adjustments like expanding your Kubernetes cluster or boosting your network bandwidth, well, those sorts of things are perfect for automated reactions. Generally, the anomaly will be resolved before a human could have even typed in the commands manually. So there are 5 criteria that I've listed here: frequency, impact, coverage, probability, and time scale. Usually what I do is just run a spreadsheet of things that could be automated, and I use these with weightings to select what to automate, how to give myself a priority. Now, hopefully by now, you're starting to think about how you would apply AIOps in your environment. At the end, I will share some links on reading on deploying AIOps successfully. But where does the journey run? Well, AIOps is reimagining the DevOps CI/CD pipeline by integrating continuous monitoring and analysis with incident management and bringing it into this process. So the first step is to integrate monitoring into the CI/CD pipeline. You're going to achieve that through automated configuration. You're going to have correlation flow maps, so you don't really need a CMDB or Visio diagrams anymore. You're going to have intelligent alerting, getting rid of alert fatigue and eliminating the need for you to be defining all this threshold management. And then when there's a performance issue, the next step is to figure out the root cause. This is where our cognition engine comes in. This is achieved through a collection of specialized algorithms. We do the training. You don't have to worry about training these. We train them for you, kind of thing, and deliver them to you as a pre-trained object. We're correlating those events into a single problem, as I say, by bringing the contextual information together. And we're prioritizing the problem, or at least allowing you to prioritize the problems based on business impact, because not every problem is created equally. And we can, with the tool, I haven't demonstrated today, but, we can go down to a specific line of code that reduces performance if you need it. So the last step here is about fixing the problem given the root cause, and that's where you see the repair step coming in. And that's where, it might be optimization, it might be auto remediation. And at first, you're going to get recommended actions. You're going to get we think the root cause is here. And you're going to adjudicate those. It's augmenting you. Over time, you're going to identify that the system is identifying some of these correctly all the time, and you're going to automate the reactions to it so that it doesn't have to bother you anymore. Remember, I talked about automating the complex and the mundane. I'll reiterate that at the end. So you're going to start with AIOps finding your anomalies and then augmenting you with automated root cause analysis and then providing stress relief through auto remediation where it makes sense to you. See, the reality is that the engineering burden is only increasing. AIOps can offer you immediate relief. But to get to full value, you need to update a few things. You need to update your mindset. And this was one of the things that was hardest for me, I will say. So, you need to start thinking about prediction over reaction. And one of the hardest for me was thinking about answers over investigation. In diagnosing problems, I used to love the sort of Sherlock Holmes aspect of it, of peeling back the information and the data and uncovering the clues and eventually solving the mystery and so on, which is, good for my ego, but bad for the company. So answers over investigation, actions over analysis. I enjoyed looking at all the stats and the analysis as a data scientist, but it's really about the actions you take to return things to normal. So AIOps is only going to, it only gets smarter and better with more cross-domain information. And don't forget to include business metrics in that. So you want to get data from all the domains you can so that the correlation and contextual mapping of things gets smarter as it goes. And then you want to automate the complex, because the complex is where human error creeps in. And you want to automate the mundane, because the mundane are the things that steal away your time. They steal away your soul. The final one here is also to think about building out your skills. A career based on an expertise in one silo, I predict it's only going to wither. Be a master in something, right? Definitely do that. But also be a little bit of a jack of all trades. And this is where I talk about I-shaped skills, the master in only one thing, versus T-shaped. You're a master in something, but you've spread yourself. You have sort of, not as full a depth knowledge, but a skill set that goes across all the areas. So if you're a DBA, with deep DBA skills, learn a bit about networking. If you're an infrastructure person, learn a bit about SDLC. Whichever way it is, augment yourself. That is the goal of AIOps, is to augment yourself. You'll hear some companies talk about no-ops. I'm not a fan of that phrase. That is not the goal here. It is to augment what's going on. And then finally, I'll reiterate what I said at the start, which is I always think it's funny watching a robot fall over. I just love it. Robot falling over on a banana skin. You can't get much better than that. So with that, let's move on to questions. Oh, by the way, I'll leave this up on the screen for a little bit, Mike. There are some links here, some reading. If you want to take the topic further, then click on those. If you would like, I'll move on to the next slide in a second. It has my email address on it. If you'd like a copy, a PDF copy of the presentation, then feel free to ping it to me, and I will also share this with Mike so that he can attach it to the meeting booking. Okay, Mike.
Here's a question from Christy Patterson. She's asking, you books and courses, etc., that you could provide, that I see in the links here in this slide. But she also wants to know where do you start learning AIOps?
So AIOps is a great question, Christy. So here's where I don't know what your background is, so I'm going to go into a little more detail. I apologize if it's too much. I think that AIOps, ops is in the name, is growing out of a combined background from DevOps and SRE and traditional application performance monitoring. Gartner, when they talk about it, they sort of have, I think, 5 or 6 stages of monitoring. And then when you get to the top of the 6th stage of monitoring, you sort of start at the bottom of AIOps and go through the stages of AIOps. That's on the deployment side. On the learning side, I think that for AIOps, unless you're building the product, right? If you're a developer working for us, you need the machine learning background and data science background. But if you're working in the enterprise world, you don't need to worry about that side. Think more about the integration sides and that T-shaped skill that I mentioned. So as I say, it's good to be an expert in something. Be a strong developer, be a strong, cloud person, be a strong microservices person, front end, back end. Be a strong person that, something that will help your resume that way. But hang out with the people from other teams, not just your own team. I had a very, very quick career that got me to this point by hanging out with DBAs and listening to them talk and seeing what I could learn off them, and similarly with network people. And think about the full stack and where you're weakest, and then see if you know or can make friends with somebody in that area. So a bit of a meandering answer, but where do you start? Are there books and courses? There are courses. AppDynamics, for example, we have AppDynamics University. It is a subscription-based thing, but if your company is a customer, they can fold the cost in there to get training from us. It's funny, I got approached by somebody last week to see if I wanted to write a book. There aren't that many good AIOps books right now, but if you're reading, DevOps books and SRE books, then you are preparing yourself well for AIOps as it is rolling out today. Hopefully that answered it. Bit of a wandering answer. Any other questions?
No, right now that is the only question that has come in. Let me pull up the screen again so people can see it. And I'm hoping everybody can see the slides here.
So take your screenshot now.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to post them.
So the article in Forbes, you can just look for Forbes and Marco Coulter, and you'll probably find a couple of pieces that were written by me. Search for me on the AppDynamics site. The Tech Whisperer site down there is my personal blog. I'm throwing this up because this has my email on it. It's just marco@appdynamics.com. And if you want a PDF of the presentation or you think of questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to me.
Sounds great. Yeah, so that was kind of the question I had as well. Like Christy had, where do you kind of get started? Something that somebody wants to get into.
So, and again, it's a great question. It depends on your environment. You need monitoring. If you think of DevOps and the DevOps ribbon, monitoring's right there. If you think of the SRE, Site Reliability Engineering pyramid of needs, monitoring is the base of that pyramid. If you think of observability, metrics and traces and logs are the three pillars of observability. All of these things require monitoring. So I would start there. The DevOps Institute does some nice research once a year on what skills people are looking for, what they're hiring for.
Yeah. Skill up. Yeah.
They run the skill up days. I've spoken at a couple of them, and and I apologize, I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but it's something like 47% of companies now have performance skills, like performance monitoring skills, as a prereq to hiring people. It's like that's what they want as they bring you in. So for me right now today, because I haven't written the AIOps book, and in my opinion nobody else has yet, I would start in focusing on performance monitoring. Make sure you've got those metrics in place.
Right.
And then the next step up is the automation step, right? The same tool. You will use the same tool to do it.
Yeah, one of the good books that I would recommend would be Accelerate that was written by Dora. Accelerate book, which talks about metrics and all that as well. But let me go ahead. We have a couple of questions coming in here.
Okay.
Here's from a friend of mine that is a New Yorker that moved to California. A little bit crazy, but he wants to know, how do you justify the cost or LOE to build out an AIOps at the enterprise level?
Okay, so how do I cost support?
Justify the cost, for or LOE.
So what LOE? I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank too.
Okay.
But basically, justify the cost for it.
Anyway, I'll just go for justifying the cost. So with AIOps, again, you come back to the same sorts of things. The first thing you want to do, okay, I'm going to a little bit of inside baseball. First thing you want to do is show some value to your business side, because that's the easiest place to find money to invest in IT. So if you can, that's why I sort of talk so much about business transactions on the way through. Because if you identify that you're tracking business transactions and that you plan to automate customer experience, so not to set, for example, capacity planning based on, I don't know, a rule of thumb of 80%, but based on whether that the response time of that transaction is impacting revenue or impacting customer, response, then that's going to be an easier way of getting them to invest money into the IT side, which will invest money into AIOps. The lazy way is to try, and I do not recommend this, like don't try and use it against headcount. Oh, well, do this, we can get rid of some operators or whatever. That's not the goal here. It may alleviate headcount. It might mean that you don't have to hire some more people as you scale up and grow. But I honestly, I don't believe in sort of, deleting headcount. I believe in augmenting the people who are there so that they can get away from the mundane jobs and focus on truly high value things. So if you haven't worked it out from my personality yet, I like to meander around and answer, and then I finally get home and go. So really the answer is make sure that you tie it to a business value and then build the technology underneath that. Right? Our instinct is to go start with the technology first and go, what's the technical value? And it's like, no, if you really want the project to get funded, start the other way.
Right. So he mentioned level of effort, LOE.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a phrase for that. Well done. Today I learned, right?
Exactly.
Level of effort. All right.
Got another question here from a colleague, ex-colleague of mine, good friend. Jim Ward says, what type of data is used to train the ML system in an IT DevOps environment? How far back does the data need to go?
So this is a great question and a knowledgeable question. So we build these algorithms and then they train on data in place. So for example, when we're doing a proof of concept or something like that, we say, hey, load it in, let it run for a bit. Let it run for a week, kind of thing. And then at the end of the week, the dynamic baselining, that part of it, that contextual and time-based correlation, temporal and contextual correlation, that will start to happen, right? As it's looking at the data coming in. Now we've trained the algorithms to learn off that data and make the appropriate kind of conclusions from it. When artificial intelligence took off, one of the hardest things was sort of capturing PhDs. We have a room full of PhDs over in California who helped build out these algorithms for us. Yeah. That's why we deliver it as a black box. Like you don't need those PhDs. So that sort of the type of data to train it is the data environment. But here's the thing. That's why I keep on highlighting. I know the robot example is funny that, he can't he falls flat on his face because he was never trained to open the door. But really the message behind that is that it will get smarter with the more domain information that gets fed into it. So if you just feed it system metrics, it's going to make system metric based conclusions. You feed it network metrics and application metrics and security metrics, and it's going to be able to start correlating those together into going, hey, all of these different things that happen in different places are really just one event. They're really just one anomaly. So the type of data, numerical data, you can pull out logs, analyze and break them down, and there is some good logic to that. Logs, those one of the pillars of observability, but cross-domain data.
Gotcha. Here's another question from Mel. He says, what other tools or open source efforts should we look into?
Okay, so other tools. I'll try and hold this up in the camera. AppDynamics, wrong side, AppDynamics, Cisco, part of Cisco, who's paying for me to be here today, kind of thing, who pays my salary. So let's give a good call out to them. And the screenshots and examples you saw on the way through are based on our GA technology today. In terms of open source efforts, open telemetry is getting interesting. They merged the open census and the open trace and turned it into one family under open telemetry. It's becoming a real thing. Some people would object to me when I say that it's not really a real thing yet, but it's close. Major vendors are supporting it. We're building out our support for it right now. So open telemetry as a source of information, as an input, that's sort of, some people call that observability. I disagree with that overlap, but if that's what you think, then go with it. But that's an open source effort to be looking at.
And kind of in the same realm of the question that Mel is asking, is there any open source projects that maybe AppDynamics is collaborating in, that is geared toward AIOps?
So there are multiple projects that we submit code to, but they tend to be on the extremities.
Gotcha.
So by that I mean on the input sides, where we have lots of integration partners and we've contributed to open source and some of the standards out there. On the output side, the action side, where we're integrating with lots of partners and things. As I say, open telemetry being my current favorite source of describing the input side of, I think, something that can sort of gather metrics from systems that we may not have an agent for yet. We have been, over the last decade, the leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. That's because we have customized agents and we're able to control both ends of the conversation. The core part of this, the AIOps and the algorithms that are running in there, for us, that is our intellectual property. So there, yes, we're contributing to data science and to the improvement of algorithms as they appear in the field. And then separate from that, there is the product that we build. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. So here's a comment from Mel. He says he completely agrees about reskilling and upskilling existing workforce, that what you mentioned earlier.
Thank you, kind of thing. I mean, it's just one of those things of, I'm sure we've all met that person in our lives who, they sort of appeared to come out of the birth canal as like, I'm going to be an X, I'm going to be a network person. And then, 20 years later, they're still a network person. It's like, I don't know that that's going to work anymore.
It kind of goes the same into.
I like this Mel guy. I haven't met. This is the downside of doing this virtually. You see,
I know.
Eating Texan food. I'd much rather be. I live in Manhattan. For those people who don't know, I'd much rather be eating Texan food and hanging out with these people. But anyway,
I mean, that kind of goes what Mel mentions about reskilling and upskilling kind of goes in the sense with the DevOps Institute. Their skill up. Days that they do that's what they do is to bring the skills of the current workforce up to date to the current versions of things that are happening.
Absolutely. And I will say that coming up in October is the Skill Up Day on AIOps.
Wow.
I'll be giving a presentation there. Sorry, I'm using my computer for this, so I can't quickly look up the date. I should know it, but I don't. I'll be pre-recording a session next week sometime. But yeah, there's one coming up specifically on AIOps. They're really good days. I thoroughly recommend it. I think that Jane and Helen and the folks at DOI are doing a fantastic job. Right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And Mel just wanted to let you know that he sent you a LinkedIn request. So he's already a fan.
I will accept that tomorrow, Mel. It's late now, but I will accept those tomorrow. Please. I like that. Send them through. You can get me on Twitter at @Marco Coulter. But honestly, I probably spend more time on LinkedIn than Twitter these days.
Yeah. And I went ahead and posted the video on the DevOps Live Twitter feed. So for the DevOps Live. So if anybody missed it or want to go back and re-see it again, they could just access it from there. So.
Fantastic.
Let me see if anybody has any more questions. If not, we're going to call it a night. Going once, going twice.
Me and my first glass of wine.
Say what?
The questions are between me and my first glass of wine.
There you go. That's a good way of putting it.
There we go.
Okay, well, I want to thank you again, Marco, and definitely thank AppDynamics for being a sponsor of the DevOps Days DFW and a great supporter of the DevOps community here in Dallas.
Yep. Look forward to being there in person, and thanks so much for this opportunity.
Hopefully,
really appreciate
hopefully next year we'll have the DevOps Days in person here.
Next year.
Bring it back. That's good. You have a good evening.
You too, sir. Cheers.
Take care.